Hi, everyone. I'm Jeremy Goldberg, president and quarterback at LeagueApps. Last November, I stood in front of many of you in a packed auditorium alongside my partner Brian in New York City at the launch of NextUp, the first industry conference on youth sports. Emblazoned on the wall was a favorite quote of mine from Muhammad Ali. If your mind can conceive it and your heart can believe it, you can achieve it. Well, a confession. My mind could never have conceived of a global pandemic and resulting economic crisis that would bring the sports in this country to a halt and temporarily close this physical office that, as many of you know, was always bustling with energy. Many of your offices are similarly empty, or facilities are quiet. We've heard the stories of the challenges and the heartbreak you all have faced, but have also been amazed and inspired by the perseverance, grit, and ingenuity which you all have demonstrated. I share a similar pride in the resiliency and the commitment of the LeagueApps team. A year ago, almost to the day, I left this office with Brian and spent 2 hours with former NBA Commissioner David Stern. In his post-league career, he had mentored any number of entrepreneurs and supported their businesses, and we were fortunate to be given his advice and wisdom on any number of topics, whether we asked for it or not. Little did we know he would pass just weeks later. But as anyone who ever met David Stern would tell you, his advice and words stay with you. I recently came across this quote that speaks to this moment. You will be defined by the sum total of your responses to circumstances and events that you couldn't anticipate or imagine. At LeagueApps, we have embraced this challenge. We know you have too. NextUp University is part of our continued collective response to this moment, because what we do matters. Brian and my last memory of David Stern was spending 25 minutes getting a tour of the pictures on his wall. He told us a story of how the world faced an unprecedented virus and how the NBA, in supporting Magic Johnson and the courage he showed, put a new face on HIV/AIDS that changed the way society viewed and responded to the disease. He ended our tour with stories of meeting Nelson Mandela in a hotel room and attending his inauguration, and the belief that the two men shared in the role that sports can play in our society. Appropriately, this Nelson Mandela quote has been on the walls of every one of LeagueApps' offices. Sport has the power to change the world. That quote similarly graced the walls of last year's NextUp. And while there is no packed auditorium this year, with Muhammad Ali and Nelson Mandela's words flanking me, the sentiment is the same as we welcome you to NextUp University. Our mind conceived of an online event that would be different than any other event you've experienced before or during this pandemic. A place to hear speakers, to meet each other virtually, to learn from each other, and get the support that you deserve. Our heart believed that we could pull this off, despite all kinds of obstacles of time and distance. We believed that our community was an important part of fulfilling our mission to help youth and local sports leaders deliver amazing sports experiences for all. And here we are. Enjoy the next few days. Recognize that you and your teams are worthy of the very best investment and expertise. If you're inspired, share the link out of this event via email, text, or social media so others don't miss an incredible 3 days. Welcome to NextUp University. In January, my wife came to me and told me she was concerned about a virus in China and we needed to make plans to survive it. I dismissed her concerns. In early February, she said we needed to make plans to leave New York City. I told her, you probably should consider getting some help, which is the single worst response you can ever give to your spouse, but particularly when you turn out to be spectacularly wrong. So my wife gets an I told you so to hang over my head for the rest of our lives. Well, I may not have predicted this pandemic, and I won't say I told you so, but last November at NextUp, I did say these exact words. We need to start by recognizing that we're in the middle of a profound transformation of youth sports. Our key insight, change in youth sports, is not only inevitable, but will accelerate, as the future of youth sports will be shaped by technological change, industry consolidation, and shifts in parents' and kids' expectations. This is more true today than ever before, a reality that has only been accelerated. So I'm going to try and make another bold prediction. There may be no more important industry to respond to what is happening in our world than the youth and local sports industry. We have an enormous opportunity and a responsibility that goes with it. In the immortal words of Herb Brooks, the USA hockey coach for that Miracle on Ice team, you were born to be a player. You were meant to be here. This moment is yours. Let's recognize where we find ourselves at this moment. This country, and for this matter, our world, is rife with division. We've lost the ability to see each other, to hear each other, understand each other. We're in the midst of an economic crisis that has widened the gap between wealthy and poor. We're engaged in an unprecedented conversation about systems of racism and oppression and inequity. This is a moment for sports, for our work. My belief in the power of sports just doesn't come from heroes like Nelson Mandela, Jackie Robinson, Muhammad Ali, or Billie Jean King. It's personal. For many years, I dedicated my life to bringing about peace between Israelis and Arabs, as well as in India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. Specifically, I worked for an organization called Seeds of Peace that, as part of their programs, ran a summer camp in Maine for teens from these conflict regions. Appropriately, when you enter the state of Maine, you see a sign that says, "The way life should be." I'd gotten to know Arn Tellem, one of the top agents in all of sports, and Nancy Tellem, one of the top executives in Hollywood, that became early Seeds of Peace supporters. They not only had a passion for bringing about peace in the Middle East, but a belief in sports and in camp. Arn had coincidentally been a camper as a child at the very camp that Seeds of Peace now operated. Arn had this idea of bringing NBA players, especially rookies that he represented, to the camp each summer. You can see in this picture a few recognizable faces, like Russell Westbrook, Derrick Rose, not to mention the Lopez twins and the one and only Brian Scalabrine. Seeing NBA players interact with young kids who had experienced so much so early was amazing. On those courts in Maine, it became so clear why Nelson Mandela said that sport has the power to unite people in a way that little else does. It speaks to the youth in a language they understand. You see, when an Israeli, Palestinian, and Egyptian are in a three-man weave, they have to work together as a team. And when NBA players take time out to visit, it created a point of commonality and connection that reminded kids and all of us of how much we have in common. As a society, we've lost many of the institutions that bring us together, religion or politics for that matter. But youth and local sports is about bringing people together, about setting aside differences. It can be an antidote to division. But the opportunity we have as an industry goes beyond rebuilding a sense of community. Youth sports is about developing leaders On the Fortune list of the most powerful women, 65% had played sports competitively in high school or college. It's about preparing kids for a rapidly changing future. A Pew Research survey in 2016 found that the jobs of the future will require the ability to communicate and work together. We also know that thanks to Aspen Institute data, that kids who play sports are 15% more likely to go to college, have 40% higher test scores, and have up to 8% higher annual earnings. To say nothing of the incredible mental and physical health benefits of playing sport. Less likely to get disease, less likely to be obese, less likely to be depressed or have low self-esteem. Our work will also define the professional sports fan of the future, as those that have positive experiences playing sport are much more likely to be sports fans. Mirroring drops in sports participation, according to the latest Morning Consult survey data, Gen Z already are less likely to identify as sports fans or watch live sports compared to millennials and adults. And current 6 to 12-year-olds, often referred to as Generation Alpha, may be even less engaged. But the very power of sports is lost when kids can't access it, when they don't have great experiences and drop out, or it doesn't find a place for everyone. Youth sports mirrors the inequity in our society, and it reinforces it. Aspen Institute and Sports Fitness Industry Association data showed that participation for households under $25,000 in income declined from 38% to 28% from 2012 to 2019, while households that made more than $100,000 in income, their participation in sports increased from 47% to 49% in that same time period. We don't need data to tell us that sports is important or how it changes lives. We're products of it. It's our opportunity to extend that sports privilege to everyone. For all of these reasons why sports matter, you have chosen a profession that is meant for these times. And yes, I said profession. A few years ago, this Time magazine cover blared how kids' sports turn pro. It focused on all that's wrong with youth sports: early specialization, overcompetitiveness, dropouts, money. And while we can't dismiss or ignore the real failures of the industry, it's time to reclaim the phrase, the professionalization of youth sports. While kids need to be kids, the people in this industry need to be professionals. What we do and what needs to be done is too important to be considered a hobby. The people who work hard, sacrifice nights and weekends, time with their own families, need to be seen and supported. Whether you're a for-profit or a nonprofit, have professional staff, or are volunteer-led, it is time to embrace the emergence of the youth and local sports professional and all that entails. The reality is that the profound transformation of youth sports is here, brought about by the consolidation of the industry and technology. More than 50% of organizations are at risk of going under because of COVID. LeagueApp's data is showing that organizations that are innovating and adapting and focused on growth are bouncing back much more quickly in terms of participation and revenue, and parents are much more likely to return. Smaller organizations, especially community-run organizations, are in many cases unable to open their doors or access spaces. The real truth is that the future of youth sports and local sports is a smaller number of organizations running programs, and with intention and focus, many more kids participating. What COVID has reminded us is that organizations that succeed and have impacts will be ones that never stop innovating and learning. That's why we created LeagueApps. I mean, we're a technology company after all, not an events company. But it's also why we launched NextUp, because professionals need community and networks, and they need training and professional development. You're here at NextUp University because you get that. You understand what John Wooden meant by saying that it's what you learn after you know it all that counts. Lastly, as professionals, we have to accept the accountability and responsibility that comes with that designation. How we need to hold ourselves, each other, and our industry to the highest standards. The recognition of the platform that we've been entrusted with, which goes so far beyond wins and losses. As I've said throughout this pandemic, our industry has gone through the greatest brand exercise in history. I mean, what is the purpose of sports organizations if it can't play sports? It's embracing all that we have to offer the world. There's never been more pressure on people in this industry. You're being tested just to survive, let alone support your coaches and staff, volunteers and parents and kids, larger community, to say nothing of the broader impact we can have right now. But as Billie Jean King said, pressure is a privilege. It only comes to those who earn it. You've worked hard to build something that can be lost. You've sacrificed to put yourself in position to leave the kind of legacy that we all would want to have. The amazing thing we've learned at League Apps is that by embracing the pressure, by accepting our responsibilities to be a difference maker, it can fuel our success and growth. It's what we've seen from the most successful youth and local sports organizations in the country. And it's what you'll hear during the keynotes that follow me today and throughout this week at NextUp University. How purpose, scale, and success go hand in hand. I'll leave you where I started, in the famous words of Muhammad Ali. Impossible is just a big word thrown around by small men who find it easier to live in the world they've been given than to explore the power they have to change it. Impossible is not a fact, it's an opinion. Impossible is not a declaration, it's a dare. Impossible is potential, impossible is temporary, impossible is nothing. Defining our industry, changing our world, it's not impossible, it's an invitation. I'm now honored to introduce our next speaker, Tim Brown, the co-founder of Allbirds and a former professional soccer player in New Zealand. Allbirds has been described by the media as a unicorn, not only because of its perceived business value, but also because of its commitment to changing our world. Now, as my 5-year-old daughter will tell you, unicorns are real, and so is Allbirds. Please meet Tim Brown.